Ladies and gentlemen, the courtroom just erupted. Judge Jamar Walker didn't just gavel down. He dropped the hammer on New York Attorney General Letitia James in a ruling that could blow her entire case to pieces. We're talking about secret signal messages, an allegedly illegal prosecutor appointment, and a judge who's had enough. And when I say enough, I mean that moment in court when the judge turned and looked straight at her legal team and said, "You shut up." Guys, this is not hyperbole. That is on record. This isn't just another hearing. This is a meltdown in real time. In fact, a full-blown reversal for one of the loudest anti-Trump voices in America, arguably Letitia James. Now remember, folks, this is the same Letitia James who spent years chasing Donald J. Trump, right? Drop a yes if you remember that. But now, under President Donald J. Trump's Justice Department, the tables have turned and the spotlight is now burning hot on her. Encrypted chats with reporters, gag order fights, and a federal judge now questioning whether the prosecutor leading the charge was even lawfully appointed. The headlines are calling it a procedural issue. Don't fall for that. This is much bigger than that, okay? In fact, I'm going to prove it to you in today's video. This is about accountability. This is about the weaponization of a justice finally hitting a wall. And it's happening inside of a courtroom that no one expected to turn on the very people who built their careers accusing others. So stick with me, guys, because by the end of today's video, you're going to see exactly how the signal leak, the unlawful appointment, and this one judge's brutal rebuke could end Letitia James' case for good. Hit the like button, subscribe. Okay, folks, let's start with the bombshell that cracked this case wide open. The signal messages. Federal prosecutor Lindsay Halligan, who's been leading the case against Letitia James, got caught communicating through encrypted signal chats with a senior editor from Lawfare. Not just ordinary messages. These were set to auto-delete after just a few hours. Why? So that there would be no paper trail, no accountability, no record of what was said. Now, why does this matter is the question, right? Because when a government attorney discusses an active case with the media, especially through a platform that's designed to erase the evidence, it doesn't just raise eyebrows. It sets off alarm bells across the entire Department of Justice. The defense team for Letitia James pounced immediately, calling it secret back channel coordination between the prosecution and the sympathetic journalists. In court filings, they said this violated record preservation laws and could even taint the fairness of the trial. Now, think about that, okay? How can you hold a fair trial when one side is whispering through disappearing messages in order to shape the public narrative, right? Well, the judge called the signal exchanges unusual. Translation, they crossed the line of professional conduct. And that is where the slam moment began to build, because the moment that the signal leak hit the courtroom record, everything changed. The focus flipped from Letitia James being accused to her prosecutor being under scrutiny. And in that instant, you could pretty much feel the shift. The courtroom wasn't just quiet, it was tense. This wasn't a sideshow anymore. In fact, this was more about trust in the justice system itself. Then, of course, came the moment that everyone's talking about. The eruption. Inside the Virginia courtroom, Judge Jamar K. Walker didn't just preside, he exploded. After listening to endless bickering between the defense and the prosecution over gag orders and signal leaks, he snapped. Eyewitnesses said that the judge turned toward the attorneys, raised his voice, and declared, "That's enough. You shut up." It wasn't theater, it was control, because both sides had been trying to weaponize the media fight. Letitia James's defense wanted Halligan gagged from talking to reporters. Meanwhile, the prosecution argued the same restrictions should apply to Letitia James herself, just like they did to President Trump. You guys remember they put that gag order on President Trump? Drop a yes if you remember that, okay? And in the very end, Judge Walker made his stance crystal clear. There would be no new gag order, no selective silencing, but both sides would simply follow the rules already in place, rules forbidding public statements that could ultimately influence a trial here. So this is what made the moment go viral. The symbolism. The judge wasn't just silencing noise, he was restoring order. And make no mistake, it wasn't Halligan or James who walked out of the courtroom looking powerful. It was the judge. He slammed his gavel, looked both sides in the eye, and reminded them, the courtroom is not cable news. Now, it used to be normal to just kind of stick with one Medicare plan forever, but times have clearly changed. Premiums rise, doctors switch, benefits completely vanish. This is why the new normal is reviewing your Medicare plan every year with Chapter. They make sure that your plan grows with you instead of working against you. Now, one of our viewers, she said to me, Chapter made checking my Medicare plan so easy, I'll never skip it again. And it's true. People across the country are learning that the smartest thing that they can do for themselves isn't waiting for their plan to fail them, but making sure that it still fits their life before it does. So let me ask, are you going to stick with the old way, or or are you going to join the new normal like most people already are? Now, most people are dialing that phone number right there at the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. That phone number again is 909-563-8279. Oh, and just listen to this, guys. So Parker Carr said, we called Chapter last week. Our Blue Cross was going up $200 a month. And today they called us and found a plan here in Idaho that saved us that $200 a month. Wow. Thank you, Ron. You are awesome. Hey, Parker K, I'm really happy to hear the good news. That is real impact, guys. Real people, real savings. Now, let's get back to the courtroom fireworks, shall we? All right. So now this next one, this is where things really go from messy to potentially explosive. Because of course, the signal leak wasn't the only red flag. It was the very appointment of Lindsay Halligan herself under fire. Now, according to filings and conservative legal analysts, Halligan's role as acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia might not even be legal. So under federal law, an acting U.S. attorney can only serve for 120 days without Senate confirmation. But records show Halligan has been in that seat far longer than that. No confirmation, no renewal, nothing. This is a ticking time bomb, because if a prosecutor isn't lawfully appointed, then every indictment that they filed, including Letitia James, could be ruled invalid. Now, that's not speculation. Judges in California and Illinois have already issued similar rulings against prosecutors overstaying their appointments. But here's the kicker. Letitia James' own defense team saw that and then immediately latched onto it. They're arguing that if Halligan was never legally installed, then she has no authority to bring charges, period. Now, think about that for a second, okay? The entire case could collapse, not because of the evidence, but because of a technical illegality inside the DOJ. And this is where the real panic started. Reporters in the courtroom said that Halligan's team looked stunned when the issue was raised. But it's one thing to kind of fight over evidence, but it is another thing when your entire authority to prosecute might be wiped off the books. Now, this isn't just embarrassing. This is catastrophic, folks. In fact, it could mean that Letitia James' indictment could be completely dismissed outright under President Trump's own Department of Justice. And politically, this is a narrative that could turn into a complete earthquake. So what happened next, right? Well, Letitia James' lawyers pounced and filed what we now know is the motion to dismiss for unlawful appointment. So in the motion, they accused Halligan of being defectively appointed and acting outside of the scope of lawful authority. They even used the phrase structural constitutional violation, which means if the judge agrees, it's not just this case that falls apart. Every case Halligan touched could be reopened. They went even further than that, arguing that Halligan's actions reflected selective and retaliatory prosecution, claiming that she targeted Letitia James for political reasons, not evidence-based ones. Now, CBS News confirmed that the motion cites Halligan's signal messages as proof of bias, calling them clear attempts to manipulate media coverage and prejudice public opinion. Now, in other words, not only was her appointment allegedly illegal, but her conduct during that illegal tenure showed a disregard for fairness. Now, the defense's strategy is rather obvious. Turn the spotlight away from Letitia James and straight onto the government. Make the prosecutors the story. Make the system the villain. You see? But what's really wild here is that it's actually working. Even the judge said on record that the issue of Halligan's appointment is substantial and unresolved. Translation, this thing isn't over and the foundation of the entire case is already starting to crack. Now, this next part, this is where the signal leak turns from suspicious to potentially career ending, because according to multiple reports, prosecutor Lindsay Halligan wasn't just texting anyone on Signal. She was reportedly in direct communication with a senior editor at Lawfare, a publication openly sympathetic to the DOJ's anti-Trump factions. Now, these weren't just friendly check-ins. Sources say that the messages contain references to the case, including how to frame certain details for public perception. You heard that right, guys. The prosecutor leading this case against Letitia James was allegedly coordinating messaging with a media outlet that's covering her own case. And she did it using auto-delete messages that vanish after 8 hours. This is a clear violation of the DOJ's record preservation policies. So when the chat logs leaked, even legal insiders couldn't defend it. Former prosecutors called it a rookie mistake with massive implications, and one ethics prosecutor or professor actually told the Daily Beast that it could be grounds for disciplinary review or even disbarment. Now, the defense immediately jumped on it, calling it proof of media manipulation and a breach of grand jury secrecy. Now, this is when the story caught fire, because this isn't just about Letitia James anymore. This is about credibility. If a prosecutor can secretly text journalists on an encrypted app, then what else is happening behind closed doors? Now, this moment, this signal scandal is exactly what fueled that viral headline. Judge slams Letitia James after secret signal messages exposed in court. Because when those words hit the docket, the case stopped being about guilt or innocence and started being about integrity. But Halligan's texts weren't the only media controversy. Oh no, this thing snowballed real fast. So after the whole signal leak, Letitia James' defense filed a motion accusing the prosecution of extrajudicial communication, meaning public comments or leaks that could prejudice the case. Now, they demanded the judge impose some rather strict rules, force prosecutors to log every contact with journalists, preserve every communication, and stop any of these off-record discussions. Now, here's where it got spicy, okay? The prosecution fired back hard. Halligan's team argued that if the court imposes those restrictions, then Letitia James herself should also be bound by them. Why? Because Letitia James, for months, has been doing exactly what she's accusing others of doing, running to the cameras, calling her charges baseless, and painting herself as the victim of being weaponized in a weaponized system. Now, Halligan's reply was brutal. She told the judge, if this court is going to restrict speech, it must apply evenly. And that hit home, guys, because it exposed what the prosecution saw as Letitia James' double standard, wanting to silence others while keeping her own microphone turned up. Now, the irony couldn't be any more clear. The same media spotlight that Letitia James used to build her political brand now might be the light that's exposing her entire case. Now, all right, so here's really where the judge's gavel finally came down, okay? So after all of the shouting, the filings, the headlines, Judge Jamar K. Walker delivered his ruling. And it wasn't the victory that Letitia James was hoping for. In fact, the judge denied her request for a full gag order and for prosecutors to keep detailed communication logs with the media. In plain English, he told both sides to knock it off and follow the rules that are already in place. The ruling cited two key legal standards: Federal Rule 6E2, which bans the release of grand jury material, and Local Rule 57.1, which prohibits attorneys or local law enforcement from making statements about guilt or innocence outside the court. So instead of giving Letitia James a new weapon, the judge basically said, you already have the rules, follow them. So here's the twist, guys. That ruling actually backfired on Letitia James, because while her entire team wanted to muzzle the prosecution, the same ruling also limits her own ability to keep running to the media campaign. So this is where the courtroom tone completely changed. The judge's order didn't just silence the noise, it flipped the entire narrative. So Halligan's team walked out of the courtroom smiling. Letitia James' team looked stunned because the court had just said no gag for them, but no free speech circus for you either, Letitia James. And that, my friends, this is what made the headline scream. Judge rebukes Letitia James. Brutal ruling shifts the entire case. So let's talk about that fallout, shall we? Because it was absolutely massive. Now, for years, Letitia James has been one of the most media-savvy political figures in the country. Every press conference, every soundbite, every headline, all carefully designed to frame herself as the champion of justice and Trump as the villain. But not anymore. In fact, this case, this new order actually means that she has to shut it down. No more, this case is politically motivated statements. No more, the evidence will prove me right. None of that nonsense. Because now the court has explicitly stated that both sides must avoid any public statements that could sway public opinion or taint the jury pool. So what does that mean? Well, it means Letitia James' biggest weapon, her voice, has been taken off the table. So this is why conservative commentators call this a political muzzle, because the same AG who used the press to climb the political ladder now has to sit quietly with her own case while it unravels. The irony is rather brutal here. I mean, she built her entire brand talking, and now silence might be her only option. And so, as one legal analyst put it, the second she opens her mouth again, she risks violating the very order that she fought to create. Now, this isn't just a legal loss. This is clearly like a public relations implosion. I mean, so now I want to zoom out just for a second, okay? Because this isn't just about one courtroom or one attorney general. What's unfolding right now could reshape the entire justice system under President Donald J. Trump. Now, here's why. This isn't the first time that questions have been raised about acting U.S. attorneys exceeding their 120-day limit without Senate confirmation. It's been happening quietly across multiple federal districts, but this case with Lindsay Halligan has blown the door wide open. Now, remember, under the Trump administration, there's been a very strong push to clean house, to expose what the president himself has called the embedded rot inside the DOJ. And if Halligan's appointment is ultimately ruled unlawful, well, it's not just Letitia James' case that crumbles. It could set off a chain reaction across the country. Think about that, okay? Every indictment, every investigation that she or other improperly appointed prosecutors touched could be challenged. Cases in California, Illinois, and Washington, D.C. have already faced similar scrutiny, and this ruling right here today, this could give defense teams the precedent that they've been waiting for. So this is why political analysts are calling this the quiet earthquake, because behind all of the noise about signal chats and courtroom drama lies a much bigger story: the legitimacy of federal authority itself. And as one headline put it, President Trump's DOJ isn't just fighting cases, it's rewriting the rulebook. So whether you love him or hate him, one thing is clear: the Trump administration's crackdown on prosecutorial overreach, this is beginning to deliver shockwaves that no one can ignore. So where does all of this lead? Well, right here to the moment that everybody's talking about. If the court rules that Lindsay Halligan was unlawfully appointed, well, Letitia James' indictment could be thrown out entirely. So now, it could actually go one of two ways. If it's dismissed without prejudice, a properly appointed U.S. Attorney General could refile the charges. Simple as that. But if it's with prejudice, meaning permanently, then it's over. The entire case would be dead, finished, gone. So this is what really makes this such a high stakes showdown. Because if this case collapses, it won't just clear Letitia James, it'll also vindicate President Trump's DOJ, showing that his administration didn't need to intervene politically. The law itself did the work. Now, the symbolism here is huge. The same Letitia James who built her name going after President Trump is now standing in front of a judge, silenced by her own legal tactics, staring down the barrel of a technical knockout. Now, the whispers in DC are getting louder. Some insiders are saying that this case may already be effectively unsalvageable. Others believe that the court could delay the inevitable, buying time for a graceful exit. But either way, this is it, guys. This is the tipping point. So here's the bottom line. What started as a media circus about justice is quickly turning into a courtroom reckoning about legitimacy, integrity, and the rule of law. Now, if Halligan fails, if Halligan falls, her case falls with her. And if the case falls, well, Letitia James' long crusade against President Trump might just end the same way that it began, on national television under a flood of headlines, and this time with her name on the losing side. So what do you guys think? Like, should the court dismiss this case entirely if Halligan's appointment is ruled illegal? Drop me a comment down below, share this video everywhere, and don't forget to subscribe. This story is not over, but tonight, Letitia James might have just taken her biggest hit yet. Hit the like button, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.